Gordie is more than a poet, you see. It might be said his trades are three. There are guns and ropes and cowhide whips, so saddle up and we'll take a trip. A blast from the past, meet G.V. Pier. So few are left from that old frontier. It's on these pages you'll find preserved in loving memory to observe, in words and image, a life's collection, sealed forever with care and affection. Poems and stories and photos too. We hope you enjoy this new debut.
Well, several years ago, I heard Monty Hale recite a poem that really meant a lot to me. I really enjoyed it, and it's something to think about. And he was reciting it to a feller by the name of Tim McCoy, one of the old B-Western cowboys, and a real character and a heck of a nice guy. He died when he was about 98. But the poem was called a train song. I thought I'd do that for you now. Life is like a journey taken on a train, with a pair of travelers at each window pane. And I may sit beside you this whole journey through, or I may sit elsewhere, never knowing you. But if fate has marked us all to sit here side by side, let's be pleasant travelers, this is such a short old ride. Well, you know, truer words were never spoken or written, and I really appreciate Monty calling that poem to my attention. Well, I hope you enjoy this DVD. You know, DVDs are expensive to make in time and money. I certainly hope that you don't just make copies of this and give them to all your friends. But this next thing here is called a montage or collage. I'm not sure what those words even mean. I guess in cowboy lingo you would say, this is a whole bunch of pictures, all thrown together and then printed out. Now we're going to start off at the present day and then go backwards 55 years. Well, this is Gordie Pier, and I'm going to go backwards in life. It's about 50 years. One of the things that I did that I really enjoyed doing was quite a challenge is working for Circus World, which was owned by Martell Toy Company at the time. And they asked me to design and build an arena and put together a Wild West show. We called it the Great Western Stampede. The arena we designed was diamond shaped so that there was no corners in it for people to get hung up on horses when they were trick riding. White horse kind of represents the Lone Ranger. He rode a white horse, and the pistol bits on the horse signifies Gene Autry. During the show one day, I was running into the arena, of which I didn't have to do any talking when I was coming in. The wireless mic was turned on, but I carried the reins in my mouth so I could have a pistol in each hand shooting as I come in shooting at the outlaws. About halfway across the arena, that horse folded up and fell, and I went sailing out into the air with the reins in my mouth, come to the end of the reins, popped me like a whip and slammed me right on my back on the ground. When I sat up and began to look around, I had both pistols in my hand. The outlaw was standing there looking at me. So I shot at him. And he stood there looking at me, so I shot again. He stood there looking, so I said, "Die, damn it," and shot again, not realizing the wireless mic was on. But Circus World had 13 employees, and we put together a Wild West show that lasted 30 minutes and did it twice a day. You'll notice here is a picture of Clayton Moore and Gordie Pier, who I'm a little younger there. And this was during a stage show. In fact, this was in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Background is the stage, the back of the stage that was there. It was a western town. This was shortly after Clayton had won back his rights to wear his mask. We were practicing and I was showing him some moves that he could make where as you get older, you don't throw the gun in the air so that you don't drop it. So I was showing him some moves where you spin the gun around your finger and move your hand in different positions. When a lady walked up and says, "Let me take your picture," and Clayton said, "Turn and draw your pistol." And I swung to draw my pistol, and he said, "Remember, I'm the Lone Ranger, don't beat me." And so the lady took the picture just about the right time, and she brought these pictures by the next day and gave me copies of them, and they were taken with a little Brownie camera. This autograph here is the autograph that Clayton signed in his book of his life story, which is called "I Was That Masked Man." And he signed that book for me and sent me one of them. I'm proud of that signature. That was just 2 years before he passed away. That book is still available. It's called "I Was That Masked Man." Lash LaRue was a good friend of mine. We traveled a great deal together, and of course this is in later years. We were in Little Rock, Arkansas doing a film festival at the time this picture was taken, and everybody else that was on that film festival had worked with John Wayne. John Wayne's son Michael Wayne was there too. Lash and I were the only two that hadn't worked with John Wayne at the time that were at that film festival. The feller designed a buckle. The man's name was Bob Kenny and J.T. Hale. They put the money up and designed these belt buckles. There was 5 silver ones made and 5 gold ones made and 200 brass ones made. And they were sold, and Lash got the number 1 in gold and silver buckles and the bronze buckle. And I got the gold and the silver and the bronze buckles given to me by J.T. Hale and Bob Kenny. Lash and my buckles, like you see here, was the only 2 buckles that had black backgrounds in them. And those buckles are no longer, they were all sold out. The whip is a drover style whip. It was made by Buckheimer and Company, who was sold just about the time this whip was made to Coca-Cola Company. They were out of Frederick, Maryland. And Lash has used the drover style whip in his movies. First 3 movies he made, he used an Australian style, but he was noted for using the drover's whip and a black one. This is one of the whips that he used and had in the pictures that he gave to me several years after he had quit making pictures. And I have kept it for a number of years and proud of it. This is a picture of Irish McCullough, Gordie Peer, and Mary Roscoe, who was a performer. Some of you may remember Irish McCullough. She was Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Of course, she played in a lot of other movies. She did a picture called 5 Bold Women. Right after this picture was taken, she worked in that picture. The gun belt that Irish is wearing in this picture is my gun belt. It has a different buckle on it than it does now, but that was my gun belt. And we were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin when this picture was taken, and we were making an appearance there at the Wisconsin State Fair. This is a beaded hat band that I made several years ago, and I wore it in a lot of shows. And if you'll notice, the hat band where I'm riding a white horse is this very same hat band. It's also the one that I'm wearing in the picture of Clayton and I together that was taken on the stage in Spartanburg, South Carolina. That's Clayton and I when we appeared in a show there. I played 3 parts in that show: Randy the Roper and Snake Eye Sam and Tom Mix. Had to do some stunt work for that thing. Here's a picture of me in a shirt that I actually made, and this picture is taken in downtown Davie. And just a few feet from there is the businesses of downtown Davie, and that is a bridge that went over the canal that flows right through the middle of town. And it actually looks like I'm out in the woods. The pistol that I'm carrying is a .36 caliber Colt Navy pistol, and it's the real thing. It's not a replica. This was taken for a publicity shot for when I was working some rodeos. But I still have the shirt. Still can wear it too. Well, here I am way back when I was really young. This is in North Dakota. The feller that's with me is named Boyce Burnett. And we were working up in North Dakota and Montana at the time. I'll say I'm guessing that this picture was taken in the very early 50s. The Angora chaps that Boyce is wearing on the horse were a pair of Angora goat chaps, and they're the real thing, and I still got them. I still got the gun, the holster, and I believe I've still got that hat too. I've been asked a lot of times, well, what is a poem? And I had to think a lot about that to even answer it. And I guess you might say a poem is a thought or a story or a humorous adventure that a person experiences, and then he sits down and writes it down in words that rhyme. If you put music to it, it would be called a song. But we call them poems because I'm not a singer. This is a piece of sandstone out of Oklahoma, and a feller out there carved into this sandstone a picture of an Indian, the picture of the end of the trail. And I've always called my place here the end of the trail. That's what the sign says out here on the road. And he carved this in this stone and gave it to me to put here. So John Payne was his name. Some people know him as the one-armed bandit, but he travels around as one of the top rodeo performers in the world today. But he gave me that to have here on my place, the end of the trail. And of course, if you're leaving my place, the front of the gate says, "Keep a good thought." And that originated from a feller by the name of Lash LaRue. He never said goodbye. When he got ready to leave, he just turned and walked off and said, "Keep a good thought," walked away, and even on the phone, he didn't say goodbye. He just said, "Keep a good thought," and hung up. You know, life has a lot of problems, and a lot of times it's kind of hard to solve those problems. It's kind of like a bump in the road, or a rock in that road that you got to bump over. So we wrote a poem about that, and I'm going to do that one for you now. It's called A Rocky Road. If this road is rough and rocky in this life we journey through, we ought to take the time to remove a rock or two. For there is no greater pleasure these passing years can send than the deep down satisfaction of helping out a friend. And that's so true. We ought to try to help out our friends. In fact, that's why I do the Cowboy Schoolhouse. There's a lot of people that are trying to learn my trade, how to trick rope and how to pop whips. And so I do a thing called Cowboy Schoolhouse. And I show them exactly how to learn how to use whips and ropes and guns. In fact, we do it every year right out here at my ranch, but my show has been named that for the last 50 years, Cowboy Schoolhouse, because I explain just how to do it. Woo, cow! Woo, cow! Come on! Woo, cow! Come on! Come on! Every cowboy ought to have a few old longhorn cows. So, that's what they look like. Come on, cow! Come on! Come on! And of course they all like feed too. Well, there's a poem about a cowboy and his wife that had a bunch of cows and worked them quite often. The doctor asked the cowboy, "How'd you break your arm?" He said his wife had done it, and the doctor showed alarm. "Has she done things like this before?" "Yeah," replied the cowboy, "a dozen times or more. She's hit me with a skillet, put fractures on my head, run over me with a pickup truck. They all thought I was dead. She poisoned me, shot me, and stabbed me once or twice. I'll tell you, Doc, that woman's got a heart as cold as ice. Well, why don't you divorce her? Asked the doctor full of dread. Because I need her, Doc, to help me run my spread. Oh, I know she's sort of sneaky and she's mean and full of hate, but she's the best I've ever seen at parting cattle through a gate. She's big, she's stout, she's agile, and she likes to irrigate. And she's the only one that can open that old saggy wooden gate. At branding time, she takes the place of several hired men. And that lady is an artist at working cattle in a pen. She starts our colts and milks our cows and cooks up real good food and makes love to beat the band when you catch her in the mood. She sings just like an angel and she plays a mean guitar, and she can save your bacon when there's trouble in a bar. Oh, I know she's sort of sneaky and she's always likely to explode, but I sure would be short-handed if I sent her down the road. I think I'll keep her. Well, here in Florida we have a lot of winds. In fact, we have some pretty stout winds. And of course everybody's always asking you, how hard do you think that wind blew? So we got together and wrote a poem about how to figure that. And it has to do with beef. Of course, in the old days, you had to skin a beef out and butcher it. You didn't go to Publix and buy them. So this is the poem. To figure how hard a wind blows out on a Florida plain, you hang a fresh killed beef with a pair of logging chains. And if on the morning after you find your beef is skinned and you got to ride, find the hide, you'll know there's been some Florida wind. Well, that's a stout wind, but you know, this old chair, it belonged to a feller named Dunk Carlton. And old Dunk was a cowboy here in Okeechobee County, and he went out there and picked up one of them hides and skinned it out and laced it up on this chair on the seat in the back so that he could sit in this chair at night and watch the sun go down and watch the cattle out there and the calves running and playing. And of course, that's a cowboy's pleasant time of the evening when the sun is going down and the cows are grazing and everybody is peaceful and well, it looks like old Dunk is still here rocking in his chair. Well, Dunk, sure a pleasure to have you here with us again. Happy trails to you, partner. Well, a cowboy's life is pretty lonely, especially back in the old days. That's why a feller had plenty of time to write poems or songs. There wasn't any television, telephones, radios, things like those at the modern conveniences. And many times a feller sitting around the campfire and drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes would write down his thoughts and his dreams. But sometimes a feller would find a young lady. Then he'd get married and he'd have to kind of modernize his way of living and move into the city and have some of those conveniences. And that's what this poem is about, a feller who had to kind of redesign his life a little bit to fit his pretty young lady's lifestyle. On the day that I was married, a present I was given that was supposed to modernize my archaic way of living. Now don't think I'm ungrateful, because I'm telling you I'm not. But I've always been suspicious of a slow drip coffee pot. You see, I've never trusted cuisine cooked by Franklin's Fine. My wife says that's silly, it's all just in my mind. But one thing that always bugged me and caused my mind to doubt, a feller could just starve to death if that power pole went out. But never let it be said of me that I've treated things unfair. So one day, it got his chance, that new coffee making ware. I filled that little basket and I poured in some water too, and I sat back to wait a while for my Buck Rogers style of brew. The aroma, it admitted, was a pleasant one I found, and I caught myself relaxing to that steady dripping sound. But as I listened to that dripping, dripping, dripping,
My thoughts changed about switching, 'cause the sound was of the bathroom and not that of the kitchen. Well, when a cowboy's working, and he used to come up on the little shacks that were built out on the rangelands, and the nesters would build a hut there and kind of just move in on the land. And this is a poem about a nester. A cowboy could tell if a nester was married or not by the way he hung his door on his little homestead plot. If the door swung in, without a doubt, he was free of wedded worry. But a married man swung his door out so he could leave in a hurry. Well, it's a pleasure for me to sit here today, especially with this guy here that I'm sitting with. I'm proud to say that he's a friend of mine, and like me, he writes some cowboy poetry. I don't know whether you call it cowboy or just plain poetry, because it really doesn't say cowboy, but it's darn good poetry anyway.
Exactly.
But Bill was a Texas Ranger down on the Mexico-Texas border, and when he was riding his 40, 50 miles a day, he was packing a hog leg like this one here. And you know, a gun like this, a fella could always tell whether the man was right-handed or left-handed by simply looking at the gun. You notice that this side of these grips are lighter than what these are. This is a little darker, so this was the side that was out to the sun. So this man was right-handed that carried this gun. And this holster is one that I made years and years ago. But Bill had one just like this. And Bill was a Texas Ranger down there for a number of years. And right close there on his shirt, you see what is called a Texas Ranger badge that he still sports around with him. And Bill and I have told many a story, but in his cowboy poetry, you know, it's kind of like a thought that you come up with, or something that you come up with while you're sitting and looking around the country. And Bill has got one that he wrote many years ago. He'll probably tell you when. And I'd like to get him to recite that poem for us.
Once we had a little house. It was way back in the yard. It leaned a little to the left and looked so very tired. We were very poor, you see, but some thought us to be rich. It had 2 holes cut in the seat, and beneath it had a ditch. Now on the wall of this little house hung a big thick book, and as you had your daily pleasure, you could have a look. Many things were there to see as you thumbed through the pages. Ladies in their underwear and fashion's latest rages. This book was called Roebuck, Sears is its name. They're still in business, have reached worldly fame. I don't like to talk about a business and never say things mean. I think they were to order from, never meant to clean. Now as I sit here on this seat, suspended in my hand, looking at these pictures that are so grand, my mind does some wondering back to when I was a lad. Some of these seats were really good, there's a slick one that was bad. Good, Ray. Called the outhouse.
You know, speaking of Sears and Roebuck, if he's still running, Bill, you know, few people can remember, but Sears and Roebuck sold these Colts in their Sears and Roebuck catalog. In some place, I got a picture of one in a Sears and Roebuck on the page. They sold for $13.75. The same gun today is probably worth $3,000 bucks.
That's right.
And that's an amazing fact about Sears and Roebuck. Still in existence.
Wouldn't sell out either, would it?
No.
$3,000 they could
No,
keep.
I'll keep it. It's been good to me.
That's right. Me too, man. I saved my life, I think, many times on that border, that thing. I had several shootouts with the Mexicans on the kind of the contraband they had, you know. And at night, and it's, I learned one thing in combat. Watch for the fire. When they come out of the end of a barrel, there's going to be a streak of fire. They'd give you something to shoot at. Otherwise, you're just shooting in the dark.
That's right.
And we had several shootouts, and we killed 3 old man's boys one night in a shootout. And about a week later, it went by, and I see a thorn up on my ride ahead of me, hanging on a big locust thorn. And a white sheet, you could see it a long way. When I got up there, I'd written in English, talking about how what he's gonna get even with for shooting his boys and all that stuff. So, and about a day or two later, he killed my horse right there at the same place. And standing up above me on a little hill, pretty well thicket, you know, and he just shot. And the horse had to be walking. That's what saved me. But it took one step, and that's what put me that much ahead. Of course, the horse fell over backwards and come out in the flank all the way through the kidney and come out. I had the bullet a long time in my pocket, but didn't save my horse worth a dime. But anyhow, we had a lot of scrapes like that. And one time a horse, I was helping the boy ride a bronc. Horse run around behind me and run up this side of me and pull me off my horse and had all them claws in my hand and round the saddle horn dragging me. And took all the hide off of his hand and kept dragging me until finally one come off and then another one come off and finally lost me. But, and they put some kind of white stuff and the hide grew back. But.
Bill, I got to tell you a story. You're talking about your little house that leans there, right. The outhouse. I was a young boy that was raised by some Indians there, and we all remember the days when on Saturday night you went to the neighbors and they had a band and you got up and danced around the barn there and had a good time. We had a real classy, high-tech outhouse. It had a men's side and a women's side, and there were 3-holers. And so the old man sent us down there to clean the back out. He used to throw lime in there, you know. We cleaned out and threw lime in there and had a lid back here, and we closed it down and we got to talking. So we got a old garden hose and fixed us up a system there and got out in the woods. And then that night when they started the dance, we got over there, we had a funnel in the end of that hose. And we got that hose and we waited till some girls went inside of there and took that hose and we said, "Excuse me, ma'am, would you move over? We're painting down here." And there was a shriek and out the door they come. The old man standing up there at the barn and he saw them girls running and screaming and everything. And he started hunting. Well, we got in the car and left, and we didn't come back till about 2 o'clock in the morning. When we walked in, he was standing there waiting for us with a cow whip. He whipped our butts. But they left that building. Well, this poem has to do with a cowboy, and it's like most parts of the country, they have words that are the same thing, but they're said different. Like, for an example, in Florida, a feller carries a pocket knife, where up north, he carries a jackknife. And in some parts of the country, you have a cold drink. In other parts, it's soda. In other parts, it's pop. Well, that's what this poem has to do with, is about a guy riding a bucking horse. A cowboy likes to match his skills against a bronco that's got a strong will. But when that bronco gives way to that feller's yearning itch, in Texas they say they like 'em to pitch. While in Oklahoma, in a town called Bliss, the cowboys there say they like 'em to twist. While up in Wyoming, there's no doubt you've heard those salty old bronc dealers say buck is the word. But down in Florida, it's a matter of time till you hear someone say he's a-gonna unwind. But these are all words that can be argued, my friend, till the last bronco's robe plumb out to the end. But all hands agree, when a bronco explode, it ain't what you call it that gets the man throwed. Well, that's what, you know, the fact is, I've got throwed a few times, and the words that I said were not in that poem when I got throwed.
Well, along about the middle 70s, I began to think about retiring from show business. And I started working on my place in Florida and trying to make it a little better. Then I found out I had to have a little more money to do it. And I got to thinking about all the things I'd missed while I was traveling around the country in show business. I was sitting on the roof of the house repairing some shingles, and I got to looking around, and I thought, boy, I can see a lot from up here. And there's so much to see, and I've been missing this for years. Well, as I went back on the road, I started taking more time to see what I'd been missing. So I named this poem, A Time to See. We'll do it for you now. We go through life thinking things are so funny, and our main goal is to make lots of money and never take the time to see what God has made free for you and me. It's hard for me to understand as I look out across this land that all I view belongs to me, and I ought to take more time to see. The fragrant flowers so bright and new, they stand erect and they sparkle with dew. All these things are a joy to me. Oh, what a beautiful sight to see. The song of birds, it sounds so clear. It fills our morning air with cheer. And now I know my ears to me are a lot like eyes I have to see. To watch the children run and play, to see a sunrise every day, the distant hills, the mountains high, the rolling clouds and bright blue skies. No one can take these views from me as long as I have eyes to see. A timid deer with haunting look, he stands refreshed by yonder brook, and he knows not he belongs to me, and oh, what a thrilling sight to see. The evening shadows stretch so high, and the twinkling stars light up the sky, and I hear my master say to me, I've made this all for you to see. And I believe we ought to take more time to see.
I used to think that making love was silly as could be, but at the age of 12 a little girl told me, kiss me once, if you don't like it, then I'll go away. But when I come up for air, here's all that I could say. It may be silly, but ain't it fun? It beats picture shows and rodeos all rolled up into one. You hug a while, you kiss a while, you say I love you, hun. It may be silly, but ain't it fun? That's one of the first ones that I wrote.
Lash LaRue and I were pretty good friends for a number of years. We've done a lot of shows together, and we traveled around quite a bit. And one night while sitting in a bar, a couple of young ladies walked in and sat down beside us and got to talking with us. And after a few minutes of discussion, one of the girls said, "Are you married?" And Lash said, "Please don't ask me to marry you yet." And I said, "Hey, Lash, that's the words to a song or a poem." So that night we got up in the room, we sat down and started writing a poem to fit it. It goes like this. Please don't ask me to marry you yet. My mother would just have a fit. It was only this morning that we first met. Can't you be patient a bit? I will marry you if you like, and we'll share the same toothbrush and comb. But if you don't quit pestering me, darling, tonight, I'm going to get up, get dressed, and go home. Well, that's a Lash LaRue and Gordie Peer poem. Well, the technical director of this here DVD told me to hurry up and write some poems. And while he was telling me that, he was complaining about the bright sun and casting all the shadows. So we had to wait for the sun to go down, and then a few minutes later he was saying about it's raining now so we can't shoot. That morning somebody was telling me about how they were married and wished they were single again. And I thought, I guess this is a poem. I began to think that man is kind of strange. So I think I'm going to name this A Strange Man. But it goes like this. When you're single, you want to be married. But when you're married, you want to be single, mainly because you want to mingle. But when it's sunny, you want it rainy. And when it's rainy, you want it sunny. And you always want a whole lot of money. But when it's wet, he wants it dry. And when it's dry, he wants it wet. He never wants to break a sweat. But when it's hot, he wants it cold. And then it's cold, he wants it hot. He's always wanting what it's not. Ain't that about the truth? These two pictures that are up here, the one on my right is a picture of me working at the Flying G Ranch. The name of the horse there was Mitzi. And this morning it was about 40 degrees, which is about 20 degrees below zero in Montana. And I was wearing a vest and a pair of heavy chaps. We were working cows there that morning, and it was a little bit frosty and cool. which is not normal Florida weather. The picture on the other side is a picture of me and my mother, and this was during the filming of a picture that was done by a Canadian film company, and I do not remember the name of the film, but I played the part of an Indian chief in the picture, and I had to ride this horse without any bridle on it, just a rope in his mouth, and had to throw a spear and stick it in the ground between the guy's feet. That was done sometime in the about middle 50s.
This is a poem that was written by a friend of mine, Bill Adams, who was a Texas Ranger and went through World War II. And he spent a lot of time on horseback, riding 40 and 50 miles a day, and he used to write a lot of the poetry and stuff that he has with him today. And this is a poem that he wrote that I'd like to share with you. As we travel across Life Meadow towards our setting sun, we ought to stop and smell the flowers and enjoy them every one. Slowly stand and look about and see what God has made, things to see and love that are not for sale or trade. Seasons come and seasons go, and the greens all turn to browns, and it's easy to see at one glance why Mother Nature built no towns. Cities were built by the hand of man, with many fancy things to see. But of all of our great builders, not one can build a tree. So stand on a lofty mountain, look across our salty seas. This is Mother's Nature, and it's God's gift to you and me. This is a poem that was written by Lash LaRue, my good friend Lash LaRue. He started off in the movies called Al LaRue, and then he changed his name to Lash. They call him Albert Lash LaRue. And he wrote this poem to his 12th wife, and married 12 times. And we took it up there to her one day, and it goes like this. When I leave these mortal shores, and I ain't round this earth no more, don't weep, don't grieve, don't sigh, don't sob. I may have found a better job. Don't go around a feeling blue. I may be better off than you. And don't go buy a large bouquet for which you'll find it hard to pay. Don't tell folks I was a saint or anything you know I ain't. If you have stuff like that to spread, please hand it out before I'm dead. If you have roses, will bless your soul. Pin one in my buttonhole, but do it when I'm at my best and not when they've laid me to rest.
Lash LaRue had a favorite poem, and it was called An Everlasting Peace. He really thought a lot about this, and yet I've never really known whether he wrote it or not. But it actually had to do with the Cold War period of back several years ago. And Lash recited it many times, and I've never seen the poem written down, but I remembered it from hearing him recite it. We'd like to do that one for you. I watched the sleeping city from the crest of a sloping hill in the cold gray light of morning while everything was still. And as I watched, my thoughts were not of the beauty that lie at hand, but they wandered to death, destruction, and despair, to a torn and bleeding land. There are few who enjoy to kill or to watch their fellow man die, to wreck the homes of women and children, dropping bombs from a pale blue sky. Most of us have the same passions, no matter the language we speak, and all of us have the same want, to find the happiness we seek. I dream of a world that knows no hate, with a faith in God designed so great that aggression and intolerance would have no place, and all men would be created equal regardless of race. I know someday that I will see a world at peace with tranquility,
and that man will find the time again to raise his voice to God, and then man's right for life and liberty would never cease, and the whole world would enjoy an everlasting peace. Well, this is my old saddle here, and I rode this saddle for a number of years in circus world. In fact, there's a picture of me on a white horse riding this saddle. And Clayton Moore did an appearance in Orlando one time for a car dealership that he was appearing at for Amico Gas, and he rode this saddle and the same white horse that I was on, making that appearance there that day. Well, these guns here are a pair of guns that belong to me, actually. But in the early 1980s, Clayton Moore had his guns stolen out of his baggage in Fort Worth, Texas. And they caught the guy that got the guns, but they had to keep them for evidence for court for about 2 years. So many times when he made an appearance east of the Mississippi, he would bring his holsters, and I would carry my guns, and he carried these in place of his guns for about 2 years. And then he got his guns back finally. And speaking of that, we were good friends, and when he passed away in December of 1999, a newspaper called me up and asked me to make a statement. Well, it's pretty hard to make a statement when a friend of yours has just passed away. I wrote a poem about Clayton and I thought maybe we'd do that for you. Clayton and I were real good friends, and we stayed friends until the end. And I will miss him, this is true, but just the same as all of you. He certainly was real special to me, and now I will no longer see. But the Lone Ranger's name will never pass. He is a character that for sure will last. I did shows with him like his faithful friend, and we stayed in touch until the end. He surely meant a lot to me, and I hope someday again I'll see, when I take that last long journey's ride, that I'll be able to sit by his side. And I hope there's a table up in the sky for all the cowboys who have passed by. I know high in the heavens blue, up in the promised land, when my final roundup comes along, my true blue pals will be on hand. Now here are some names that you might see at that table with a chair that's waiting for me. There's Roy and Gene and Johnny Mac, Eddie and Lash and a sidekick named Pat, Jocko Duke, Rex, Tex, and Tim, and of course there's Gabby, Smiley, Fuzzy, and Slim, Walter, Yak, Tom, Gary, and Hoppy, Eric and Sunset, Duncan and Rocky, Bond, Blocker, Boone, Curtis, and Wakely, Barcroft, Bannon, Mason, and Wilkie, Iron Eyes, Dan, George, Will, and of course there's Jay, and right by his side is Kemosabe called Clay. Many of you can remember the time when you go to a movie for just one dime. But these names I have mentioned are in the past. But in my mind, they'll always last. I wonder, who's going to ride our silver stallions? Who's going to sing our cowboy songs? Who's going to save us from the outlaws with all of our Western heroes gone?
Thank you.